Welcome to SSPTV Community News. I'm Lisa Sugart. It was a murder that rocked the city of Hazleton. 9-year-old Marie Chiverella was abducted and murdered on her way to the former St. Joseph's School back in 1964. Then there was a break in the case in 2007. And thanks to new techniques in 2022, the Pennsylvania State Police held a press conference and announced that they had found a suspect.
So our suspect has been identified as James Paul Fort. He was born in 1941 and he died in 1980. Unfortunately, Mr. Fort's not alive for us to prosecute. However, he is the person that committed this crime.
Today, I am very pleased to be joined by former Hazleton Standard Speaker reporter Amanda Chrisman. Amanda covered this story for years in the newspaper, and she is now being featured in a special episode of Cold Case Files, A&E's Cold Case Files, seen on Hulu. Amanda, thanks so much for being here. This is pretty impressive that you are part of this story that is being told. What was your reaction, I guess, first of all, when they contacted you and said, hey, we want to interview you for Cold Case Files?
Well, I was scared. I'm usually the one who asks the questions, so it is odd. But at the same time, I saw that her story, although it's horrible and tragic, might help somebody else, might help another family protect their child. It might help law enforcement. It might give someone the idea that, hey, we should keep plugging away at our case too, because maybe someday technology will lead us in the right direction and we'll be able to name somebody. It might solve a case. So I thought, you know, seeing a broader audience, this story might bring some change that's positive. So I told them I would go ahead and do it.
And you did a great job, because if you haven't seen it yet, it's on Hulu, and it really is phenomenal. It is season 4, episode 4, so you want to watch it. And you had told too how this impacted your life growing up. You heard about this story. We all did. That, you know, that was like the first horrific case really that was in our area that made the headlines.
And it stunned people. It was stunning. So my parents were children when this happened. They were close to Maurice's age. They didn't know much about what was going on at that time, but their parents, my grandparents, certainly did. And the way that kids acted in the community changed. So parents were more protective. They weren't really letting their children walk alone, be outside alone. They always had to be in groups. So I grew up not, again, knowing the totality of the story, but my parents would, you know, remind us not to talk to strangers, because there was a little girl in our community that went missing and bad things happened to her. So it became a teaching moment for my generation coming up, coming of age, to be aware of your surroundings, and, you know, just always be with somebody. If somebody grabbed you, to yell, to scream, to fight. As I got older, I realized what exactly happened to her, and her humanity was taken away. And then as a mom, it affects you a little bit different, because that's our job, is to protect our kids, and not just our kids, but all of our kids in the community. It's our duty to make sure they're safe. And I can't imagine if anybody would have seen her being abducted that they wouldn't have intervened and you know, prevented it. But we don't know exactly how she was, you know, abducted. We don't know the details of that, and we may never know. But we do know who did it. Well, it doesn't take away that she was taken away from us. It at least gives a degree of closure, and that's something that the family had brought up, that there is no real closure when it's a murder. But there is a degree of closure when at least you know who did it.
Absolutely. And you had to report on this over the years, that still no suspects, it was still a cold case, and it was still being investigated. How impressed were you that the police did not give up on this, and then thanks to new technology and that genealogist who was only a teenager at the time, still in college, I mean, that was amazing what he did to actually solve this case.
If one of the people involved in this investigation, one of the law enforcement officers, the genealogists, the DNA labs, didn't contribute through these 58 years of wondering who did this, I don't think we'd be at this spot right now. It was truly a tale of the stars aligning. The law enforcement back in, when this happened, 58 years ago, well, more than 58 years ago now, they worked countless hours on this case. They tracked down every single lead that you could think of, from local sexual deviants to people who came up on the radar out of Luzerne County, to Bristol, Pennsylvania, where a similar case had happened that's still unsolved. So they really pushed their limits, and a state trooper told me back then they didn't have overtime, so these were guys who were working outside of their normal hours, not getting paid for this. That's how much they wanted this case solved. And I thought that was a really awesome part of this story, was this little girl, although she went through something so tragic and this family went through something so tragic, these investigators just kept pushing forward. They just kept thinking of her and her family and the community and wanting it solved. And I think that was what was the catalyst to move this case to today, where technology and ultimately a genealogist pitch in and we find out who her assailant was.
And now, what was your reaction when you saw the show? I mean, I thought you did a really great job.
Thank you.
And the family also, family members talked, and they're not bitter, like they forgive.
And
they're amazing.
I was so grateful that Annie kept that in the story for people to see. I don't know what it's like to go through that type of tragedy. We all have a personal tragedy, at least, that we've been through in our lifetimes, but theirs was just so gut-wrenching. But then to hear them say that they don't wish any ill will, that they're leaving, justice up to God, to me was astounding and in a way beautiful. I felt like they are listening to their hearts and trying to be good humans in spite of all of this tragedy that happened to them. But also that they made a point to say that they didn't wish any ill will on his family, I thought was an important message to convey as well. Just because the family didn't do anything to Maurice, it was one person.